Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, was one of the most mysterious and accurate psychics of the 20th century. He gave over 14,000 readings while in a trance state, covering topics from health and reincarnation to future world events and hidden knowledge about animals. While many know him for predictions about world changes and spiritual awakenings, few people are aware that Cayce spoke about dogs and their role in the evolution of human consciousness. What he said almost 100 years ago is eerily matching events and trends happening right now, and the implications go far beyond cute pets or loyal companions. According to Cayce's readings, dogs would not only become increasingly important to human life, but would also act as messengers and healers in ways science would eventually begin to understand. He suggested that dogs are attuned to subtle energies, emotions, and even karmic patterns in ways most humans are not, and that they could act as bridges between the human and the spiritual realms. At the time, this might have sounded poetic or mystical, but today modern research in animal cognition, emotional intelligence, and therapy animals is revealing how accurate his vision was. In several readings, Cayce mentioned that animals, especially dogs, were part of the same soul family as humans. He said that certain souls chose to incarnate in animal form, not as punishment but as service to humanity, to teach humans unconditional love, empathy, and presence. In one particular reading from the 1930s, Cayce described a future where dogs would be recognized not only for companionship but for their ability to sense illness, predict danger, and even guide humanity during periods of great change. This was decades before service dogs, therapy animals, and emotional support animals became a recognized and regulated part of society. He foresaw a time when the bond between humans and dogs would deepen to the point where dogs would be considered almost co-workers in the spiritual growth of humanity. What's happening now is that science is catching up to the mysticism. Studies have shown that dogs can detect changes in human body chemistry through smell, allowing them to sense seizures before they happen, detect certain cancers, and even predict changes in blood sugar for diabetics. This is exactly in line with Cayce's description of dogs as sensitive to the vibrations of the body. He spoke about vibrations constantly, referring to the energy fields that surround all living beings. Dogs, according to him, could tune into these vibrations naturally without training. The prophecy also touched on something more profound. Cayce suggested that during times of collective human stress and upheaval, dogs would play a key role in stabilizing emotional energy fields. He implied that their presence in homes, communities, and even hospitals would be more than comforting, it would be energetically balancing. And today, as rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness climb, therapy dog programs are spreading across the globe, from schools and nursing homes to disaster relief zones. This was not common in his lifetime, but it is becoming a standard practice now. Another aspect of his prophecy was the idea that dogs would act as messengers, not in the sense of carrying words, but of carrying energetic information. He described them as being able to sense shifts in nature and society before humans could perceive them. Modern pet owners often report dogs acting strangely before earthquakes, storms, or even before their human owners experience personal crises. This intuitive awareness aligns with Cayce's words that dogs would warn and prepare their humans for changes ahead. But here is where it gets even stranger. Cayce hinted that as human consciousness evolves, there would be cases where the bond between a human and a dog becomes so deep that it is part of a shared soul journey. He suggested that some dogs in the future would not just be pets but soul companions, reincarnating with the same human over multiple lifetimes to assist them in specific missions. This concept of soul animals is something we hear more often now in spiritual and metaphysical circles, and many people claim to feel that a current dog is a reincarnation of a beloved pet from their past. The modern movement of recognizing pets as family members, legal cases giving animals rights, and even advanced technology to understand animal communication all mirror what Cayce foresaw. He believed that eventually humans would create methods to communicate more clearly with dogs beyond training commands. We are seeing the early stages of this with push-button communication boards, where dogs press buttons to express needs, feelings, or questions, a technology that would have been unimaginable in Cayce's time. The prophecy is not only about the relationship itself, but about the timing. Cayce linked the rising prominence of dogs to a period of human history marked by rapid technological growth, social upheaval, and a yearning for reconnection to nature. This is exactly where we are now. We live in a hyper-connected digital world, yet rates of isolation are higher than ever, and many people find their deepest moments of peace and presence not with other humans, but when walking or playing with their dogs. Cayce saw dogs as anchors for human souls during turbulent times, grounding us in the present and teaching us a love that is non-transactional, pure, and without agenda. What is unfolding now suggests that this part of his prophecy is already in motion, but there is more to the story, and the next part involves a startling vision he shared about how dogs would help usher in a new kind of human awareness, a shift that could change how we view not only animals, but consciousness itself. Cayce described a future where human and animal consciousness would overlap more visibly, where the veil between species communication would thin, and dogs would become active participants in guiding human evolution. He suggested that, as humans develop higher sensitivity to energies, emotions, and thought patterns, they would begin to perceive the constant, silent conversation happening between them and their dogs. This was not metaphorical. In his view, he meant that thought-to-thought communication would emerge naturally in certain relationships, long before technology made it common. The fascinating thing is that modern research in telepathy, animal communication, and empathic connection is moving in this exact direction. There are documented cases of dogs reacting instantly to a human's unspoken thought or intention, even without any physical cues. Cayce would have seen this as evidence of the shared soul field between humans and their dogs. He stated that, as human consciousness accelerates, dogs will mirror this evolution by exhibiting more complex emotions, problem-solving, and even symbolic understanding. This means we may see dogs behaving in ways that suggest they comprehend concepts like fairness, gratitude, or even spiritual devotion more deeply than science currently acknowledges. Another layer of his prophecy focused on the healing role of dogs in what he called the vibrational crises of humanity. He explained that, during times when human society collectively generates high levels of fear, anger, or grief, the energetic field of the planet becomes unstable. Dogs, with their ability to harmonize emotional frequencies, would be drawn to people and communities most in need of stability. In this way, they would act as living stabilizers, grounding emotional turbulence just by their presence. In today's world, with global anxiety, political unrest, and environmental concerns, therapy and service dogs are being deployed not just for individuals, but for entire communities after natural disasters or traumatic events. This is exactly the kind of collective healing Cayce was referring to. He also warned that, as the human-animal connection deepens, there would be a temptation to exploit it through genetic manipulation and overbreeding for profit. He cautioned that this would create imbalances and even karmic consequences, not just for the dogs, but for humanity itself, because, in his framework, harming or distorting a being from your own soul family has ripple effects that return to you. We are seeing this unfold in the health crises of certain breeds and in the ethical debates over cloning and genetic engineering of pets. Cayce's vision challenges us to treat dogs not as property but as partners in the shared work of evolving consciousness. The prophecy even extended to the idea that dogs could become part of cooperative networks in human communities. Imagine a future where dogs are integrated into education, mental health programs, and environmental monitoring, not just as helpers, but as active participants. Cayce hinted that dogs would be able to detect changes in the Earth's magnetic field, water quality, and other subtle environmental shifts before instruments could confirm them. In recent years, researchers have indeed observed unusual animal behavior before earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions, and dogs are part of these observations. He linked this environmental sensitivity to the same vibrational attunement that allows dogs to sense changes in human health and mood. Cayce saw it as one continuous ability tuned to different layers of reality. In one of his most intriguing statements, he said that dogs and other animals could help humans remember the language before words, a way of relating that humanity once had, but forgot, as it became more mentally focused and less instinctually connected. This ancient language was not about vocabulary, but about resonance, the way two beings can share a state of mind or emotion without translating it into sound. He believed that recovering this capacity was essential to humanity's spiritual evolution, and that dogs would be key teachers in this process. The timing he gave for this greater awakening was a period of major change in both the environment and human society, when the old structures no longer satisfied and new ways of living were urgently sought. He said dogs would appear in dreams, visions, and synchronistic encounters to guide individuals toward their life path. This has been reported increasingly in recent years, with people sharing stories of finding a dog at exactly the moment they were about to make a life-changing decision, or during a period of deep personal crisis. Sometimes, these dogs turn out to be strays, rescues, or sudden adoptions that seem orchestrated by fate rather than chance. These events often lead to profound shifts in the person's priorities and lifestyle, aligning them with greater authenticity and purpose. It is in this context that we can see Cayce's prophecy not just as a prediction, but as a call to attention. He was telling us to look at the dogs in our lives now, and see them not just as animals, but as co-travelers, with specific missions tailored to us personally and collectively. The idea that the dog sleeping at your feet could be actively influencing your emotional state, guiding your decisions, and even protecting your future might sound extraordinary, but, in Cayce's view, this is exactly what is happening and will happen more often as the years progress. The next part of his prophecy takes an even stranger turn, because it touches on reincarnation in a way that connects directly to how certain dogs might be returning now, with urgent purposes tied to the times we live in. Cayce spoke about reincarnation not just as a human phenomenon, but as something that applied to all living beings within what he called the soul families. According to him, dogs often reincarnate alongside humans they have bonded with in past lives. He described this as a mutual agreement made in the soul realm before incarnation, a pact to meet again and assist one another in the upcoming lifetime. In some cases, the human may have once been the caretaker, and in other lives the roles may shift, the dog serving as the guide, protector, or emotional anchor. This was not about hierarchy, but about mutual growth. He suggested that the deep, unexplainable connection you sometimes feel when you meet a dog for the first time, as if you have known them forever, is often a sign of this past life connection. He even said that certain dogs come back with very specific timing, for example, appearing in your life just as you are about to face a major trial or make a key decision, because they have come to help you stay aligned with your higher path. This part of his prophecy is resonating strongly now, because of the number of stories surfacing where people adopt a new dog after losing one, and then witness behaviors, quirks, and even preferences that perfectly match the previous companion. The uncanny resemblance in personality and habits has led many to believe their old friend has returned. Cayce would say that, in these cases, it is not just sentimentality, but an actual continuation of the soul bond. Another aspect of his vision was that certain dogs are incarnating now with heightened abilities because of the transitional period humanity is in. He saw this era as one of accelerated change, where the vibrational gap between physical reality and spiritual awareness would be thinning. This would allow certain animals, especially dogs, to express more of their higher nature within a single lifetime. It might look like unusually advanced problem-solving, empathy that borders on human level, or even healing abilities. Some modern accounts describe dogs placing themselves on an area of the human body that is in pain, and the pain lessening afterward, or dogs seeking out people in distress without any obvious signals to guide them. Cayce framed this as the natural expression of a shared energy field, where the dog is able to redistribute or harmonize vibrational imbalances simply by their presence or touch. He warned, however, that for this deeper bond and purpose to unfold, humans would have to raise their level of respect, care, and consciousness toward dogs. The prophecy included a sobering point about karmic responsibility, stating that abuse, neglect, or exploitation of dogs in this period would have intensified consequences, not only spiritually, but in terms of societal instability. He believed that how we treat the animals closest to us, especially those from our soul family, would directly mirror the harmony or disharmony of our human relationships. If cruelty is normalized toward them, disconnection will spread between people as well. This part of his warning feels urgent today, when news stories often surface about mistreatment of animals, while at the same time we are seeing unprecedented levels of awareness about animal rights. The tension between these two trends could be the very fork in the road Cayce foresaw, where humanity must decide whether it will deepen the alliance or damage it. The prophecy also touched on a fascinating point about dogs acting as soul mirrors. He said that, just as they can harmonize our emotional state, they can also reveal our hidden imbalances. Often, when a dog develops unexplained behavioral issues, Cayce suggested it could be reflecting the stress, unresolved conflict, or disharmony in the household, not just in an abstract sense, but as an energetic imprint they have taken on from their human companions. In this way, the dog becomes both a warning system and a healing opportunity, because in working to restore their well-being, you may also resolve your own. This idea is increasingly echoed by holistic veterinarians and animal communicators, who see a direct link between the emotional state of the human and the health of their dog. Cayce's larger point was that, by paying attention to these reflections, we could accelerate our own spiritual growth, because the lessons are delivered in a pure, loyal, and unconditional package. Dogs do not judge, they simply respond, and in their responses lies the map to our own inner state. He even went so far as to say that some of the most advanced spiritual lessons we will learn in this era will come not from books or teachers, but from the dogs who share our homes, streets, and lives. His words carry a sense of urgency because he described this period as a closing window, a rare opportunity for humans and dogs to advance together in a leap of consciousness. He believed that if we embrace it now, the alliance will strengthen and carry us into a more harmonious age, but if we ignore it, we may lose a vital key to balancing human society during turbulent times. The next part of the prophecy moves into territory that is both mystical and practical. He spoke about how dogs would play a direct role in guiding humanity through environmental and societal upheavals that he foresaw arriving in waves during the early 21st century, and many believe those waves have already begun. In Cayce's vision, the role of dogs during environmental and societal upheavals was not symbolic, but literal. He saw them as active participants in guiding and protecting humans during times when traditional systems would falter. He predicted that, as climate patterns shifted and natural disasters increased, dogs would emerge as both early warning systems and survival allies. He described them detecting subtle environmental changes long before humans could sense them, picking up vibrations in the earth, shifts in air pressure, and changes in electromagnetic fields that signal approaching storms, earthquakes, or other natural events. This was not just about heightened senses, but about an intuitive alignment with the planet itself. Cayce said that dogs would be drawn to people who needed to be in the right place at the right time, almost as if led by an unseen hand guiding them to safety. There are already modern accounts eerily matching this description, stories of dogs alerting families to tornadoes minutes before sirens went off, or pulling children away from areas where gas leaks were discovered. He also saw dogs playing a crucial role in emotional survival during crises. He explained that, in periods of social instability, people's nervous systems would be under extreme stress, and that dogs, by their very nature, would help regulate human emotional states, preventing panic and promoting grounded decision-making. He described scenes where communities facing blackouts, food shortages, or even civil unrest would find stability in the calm presence of their canine companions. Dogs, he said, would not just comfort, but anchor the energy of a group, holding a steady frequency that humans could attune to, much like tuning a radio to a clear station. This emotional regulation, according to Cayce, could be the deciding factor between chaos and cooperation in moments of high tension. The prophecy also touched on the role of dogs in bridging human divisions during these upheavals. He suggested that, in times when social and political divides became extreme, dogs would act as neutral ground, a shared point of love and care that transcends ideology or identity. In neighborhoods where trust between people had broken down, he saw dogs creating unexpected moments of unity, perhaps through a lost dog bringing neighbors together, or through community efforts to care for strays. In his view, these small acts would ripple outward, slowly repairing fractured human connections. He warned that this bridging role would only be possible if humanity recognized dogs not as property, but as sentient partners in the shared survival of the planet. This recognition, he believed, was part of a greater shift in consciousness that was necessary for humanity to navigate the turbulent decades ahead. Another striking element in Cayce's prediction was his assertion that certain dogs would be born with an almost uncanny sense of direction and timing. He saw them leading people during evacuations, guiding them through chaotic, unfamiliar terrain to safety without ever having traveled the route before. In his framework, this was not coincidence, but the expression of a soul-level map, a memory carried over from previous lives or given through spiritual guidance in dreams. He noted that many would dismiss these events as lucky, but that those who were open to the deeper meaning would realize they were witnessing the active collaboration between the human and animal kingdoms in service to survival. Cayce even envisioned dogs assisting in the rebuilding process after disasters had passed. He said they would help heal communities not just emotionally, but energetically. Their joy, playfulness, and resilience would remind humans of hope and possibility, pulling people out of trauma and into creation mode faster than they might have managed on their own. In some cases, he foresaw dogs becoming symbols for renewal, inspiring art, local movements, and even new community traditions centered on care and cooperation. His prophecy was not without a warning, however. He cautioned that, in times of upheaval, there would be those who exploited dogs for control or violence, and that such actions would carry heavy karmic consequences. He urged people to be vigilant in protecting dogs just as much as dogs would protect them, because the energetic exchange worked both ways. Harm to them would disrupt the flow of guidance and protection they were meant to provide, creating more difficulty for humans in the process. In modern times, as we see increased reports of dogs rescuing people during floods, sensing earthquakes before they happen, or providing emotional support to entire communities after tragedies, Cayce's words take on a new weight. It is as if his vision is not just a prediction, but a manual for recognizing and valuing the partnership that has been quietly building for millennia. The next part of his prophecy moves into the deeply mystical. He spoke about how, in the not-so-distant future, dogs would become active participants in humanity's spiritual awakening, acting as catalysts for a new kind of perception, one where the boundary between human and animal consciousness begins to dissolve, and where shared telepathy, empathy, and purpose become normal rather than rare. Cayce's most mystical insight into the future role of dogs was his vision of them as catalysts for a merging of consciousness between humans and animals. He spoke of a time when people would begin to perceive their dogs not simply as companions, but as co-participants in a shared field of awareness. In his trance readings, he described this as a thinning of the veil, where the traditional separation between human thought and animal instinct would dissolve in moments of pure connection. Cayce believed this would not be a gradual cultural shift, but something triggered by necessity. During global changes and crises, when humans would be forced to slow down and rely less on technology, there would be a resurgence of direct, intuitive communication with the natural world. Dogs, he said, would be the first bridge into this realm, because their loyalty and emotional transparency make them the easiest channel for humans to attune to. He predicted that many people would begin to experience spontaneous flashes of telepathy with their dogs, feeling what the animal feels, knowing what it wants, without any sound or gesture. He explained that this is not magic, but a restoration of a faculty humans once had, but lost over centuries of distraction and over-reliance on external signals. According to Cayce, this reawakening would be deeply healing for the human psyche. It would remind people of the web of life they are part of, and break the illusion of separateness that has caused so much ecological and social harm. He described scenes of disaster recovery, where dogs and their humans moved as one entity, reacting to danger or opportunity in perfect sync, without a single word being spoken. In some cases, the dog would lead the human in ways that could not be explained by training or prior knowledge, and the human would trust instinctively, without hesitation. This mutual trust, he said, would be the seed for a wider trust between humans themselves. Cayce also spoke of a rise in what he called soul recognition, moments when a person would meet a dog and feel an immediate, unexplainable connection, as if they had known each other for lifetimes. He insisted this was not imagination, but a recognition of soul contracts, agreements made before birth for mutual assistance, guidance, and growth. He said that, in many cases, The dogs in people's lives would have been human companions in past incarnations, reversing roles to offer new lessons in empathy, patience, or unconditional love. In the same way, some humans might feel drawn to volunteer or protect animals without knowing why. Their souls were honoring old bonds. This recognition would, according to him, create a wave of compassion across the globe as people began to understand the depth of their relationships with animals, not as property owners, but as family members in the truest sense. The spiritual awakening that Cayce described also involved dogs helping to open human perception to subtler realms. He claimed that, as the electromagnetic field of the planet fluctuated in the coming decades, more people would begin to see or sense energies that were previously invisible. Dogs would act as guides in this process because they already perceive frequencies humans do not. He envisioned households where people would start noticing their dogs reacting to presences in the room before they themselves sensed anything, and instead of dismissing it, they would begin to pay attention. In doing so, they would learn to trust their own extrasensory perceptions. He even suggested that certain dogs would appear in people's lives specifically to initiate them into this expanded awareness, arriving unexpectedly and leaving once the lesson was complete. Cayce warned that this merging of consciousness would challenge traditional religious and scientific views. It would demand a new humility from humans, an acknowledgement that intelligence and spiritual depth are not the sole domain of our species. He saw this as a key to humanity's survival because it would dismantle the mindset of domination over nature, replacing it with one of partnership and stewardship. This transformation in perception would ripple out far beyond the human-dog relationship, touching how people interact with all living beings. In practical terms, Cayce foresaw that dogs would influence human creativity during this awakening, inspiring music, art, and storytelling that carried deeper truths about unity and the unseen world. He described painters capturing the gaze of a dog in a way that seemed to look through the viewer, and poets writing about shared dreams with their animals. He believed that such expressions would serve as cultural breadcrumbs, guiding more people toward this expanded way of being. The most striking element of this part of his prophecy was his assertion that dogs would, in some cases, deliver messages from what he called the other side, not in human language, but in symbols, actions, or dreams that carried clear meaning to the person receiving them. This might sound fantastical, but Cayce framed it as a natural extension of the deep bond between species, once the psychic channel was open. In his words, the dog becomes the messenger and the message at the same time, a living reminder that consciousness is not bound by form or species. The prophecy closes with a vision that feels both mystical and grounding, a future where humans walk side by side with dogs, not as owners and pets, but as equal travelers on the path of evolution, sharing not just homes, but heartbeats and horizons. In the closing sections of his readings on this subject, Cayce offered both a hopeful vision and a sober warning. He was clear that the unfolding of this prophecy about dogs was not guaranteed to happen in its highest form. It depended on human choice. He explained that the shift toward deeper connection with dogs, and through them with all of nature, could be accelerated or delayed by how people responded to the challenges of the time. If humanity met crisis with fear, aggression, and further disconnection from the natural world, then dogs would still try to fulfill their role, but the relationship would be strained. He foresaw scenarios where dogs would mirror the anxiety, chaos, and mistrust of their human companions, making it harder for the telepathic bond to flourish. However, if humanity met those same challenges with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to learn from animals, then the relationship could become a doorway into an entirely new phase of human consciousness. Cayce's final advice was deceptively simple, yet profoundly challenging. He urged people to spend time in genuine presence with their dogs, to look into their eyes without agenda, to listen to them without words, and to observe how they respond to different energies in the home and in nature. He said that this kind of mindful attention would naturally begin to awaken the dormant senses in humans, allowing the prophetic connection to take root. He emphasized that the point was not to turn dogs into mystical tools or to romanticize them, but to meet them as they are, with honesty and respect. According to him, the more consistently this was done, the more dogs would respond with behaviors and signals that would guide humans toward balance and harmony. In a surprising turn, Cayce also spoke of dogs as environmental sentinels, predicting that, in times of ecological disruption, they would display unusual collective behaviors, such as gathering in specific places or avoiding certain areas entirely. He suggested that humans should pay close attention to such patterns, because they might be early warnings about changes in the Earth's magnetic field or the health of the environment. He linked this to his broader prophecies about Earth changes, saying that dogs could sense and react to shifts long before human instruments could detect them. This heightened sensitivity would be one of the ways dogs helped communities adapt to a rapidly changing world. Cayce also touched on the role of children in this prophecy. He said that children, born during the time of these global changes, would often have a natural ability to understand dogs on a level that baffled adults. They would talk about what their dogs were thinking or feeling with casual certainty, and often be correct. He advised parents not to dismiss these experiences as fantasy, but to encourage them, seeing them as signs of the new consciousness taking root. In some cases, he even foresaw programs where dogs would be intentionally paired with sensitive children to help both grow into their potential. Together, they would act as seeds for a culture more in tune with the living world. One of Cayce's more startling statements was that, in the future, the bond between certain humans and dogs would be so strong that the death of the dog would not end the relationship. The human might dream of the dog in vivid detail, or feel its presence during critical moments, and in some cases, the dog might reincarnate into the person's life to continue the shared work. He framed this not as superstition, but as part of the natural cycle of soul agreements. He believed that such reunions would be more common in the era he described, because the thinning veil would make cross-life recognition easier. For all the mystical elements of his prophecy, Cayce remained grounded in the practical. He warned against seeing dogs only through a spiritual lens while neglecting their physical needs. He reminded people that this partnership was built on mutual care, and that feeding, housing, and protecting dogs was as important as any psychic connection. Without that basic foundation, the higher aspects of the prophecy could not flourish. His last, and perhaps most beautiful image, was of a future where cities and rural areas alike were filled with people walking alongside their dogs, not hurriedly, but with an easy rhythm, matching pace, step for step. He described the quiet joy of these walks as a form of meditation in motion, where both human and dog tuned to the same unspoken frequency. In such moments, the world itself seemed to pause and breathe with them. Cayce saw these moments not as rare, but as everyday occurrences in the future, if humanity chose well. He believed that, in this shared stillness, people would remember what they had forgotten, that they are part of one living fabric, that their lives and the lives of animals and the earth itself are inseparably woven together. And he believed that dogs would be the ones to help humanity remember, because they already live as if this truth were obvious. In his final words on the matter, Cayce said, "The dog is not only your friend, it is your mirror, your teacher, your bridge. Walk with it as you would walk with your own soul, for in truth you are." When those words were read back to him after the trance, he reportedly smiled and said simply, "They will understand when the time comes." And perhaps, looking around today at the countless ways dogs are entering therapy, schools, disaster response, emotional healing, and even subtle energetic work, we can begin to see that time arriving, not in some distant future, but in the lives we are living right now.